Good evening. I'm Keisha Rogers, and I want to welcome you to our January 2nd, 2024 LaRouche PAC Strategic Overview. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to 2024. As we enter into this new year, this is going to be a decisive year for saving our republic, stopping the globalists, and defending the presidency of the United States. And that means putting Donald Trump in the White House. And as people may have seen, LaRouche PAC actually put out a year-end review of our very critical role in the fight to save our republic, to stop the prosecutions against Trump over the last year in 2023, and what we were able to accomplish and what we continue to represent in this fight, as we have put forth what is needed to realize a victory for the United States. And that victory is going to be determined on you, making America great again, stopping the globalist agenda, stopping the deep state is going to depend on your understanding of how we crush the enemy of this nation of humanity. And one of the most important things that we have put out that culminated in ending the 2023 year was a very important report and a series of reports that have been put out at the time where the attacks on President Trump have continued to escalate. The threat to President Trump's life, as many have seen that have come out on numerous occasions. Recently, you've had threats that have come out by Kagan, who is the husband of Victoria Nuland, who led the operations in Ukraine that in 2014, as we've talked about. Various other people have talked about why they are determined to stop Trump from having a second term in office. And this isn't just about a stolen election and what happened in 2020. It's about understanding how the British Empire, as LaRouche PAC and our founder, Lyndon LaRouche, once made very clear on why the British kill American presidents. We have actually taken this campaign and understanding of what the British role is and has been for many decades in the fight to destroy our republic and destroy any presidential candidate that represents an antithesis to this imperial British rule. And the recent report, five-part dossier that has been put out by Barbara Boyd and Bob Ingram, is absolutely critical. People should take a look at this. It has picked up traction in many different platforms. It's titled the Police Dossier. It is the British who murder our presidents. And this is a series on the British Empire's destruction and killing of US presidents, from William McKinley to Lincoln to John F. Kennedy, and also goes through a very detailed analysis and understanding of what we've talked about over the years of going back to how this attack started in 2016, 2015 on President Donald Trump by the British Empire, and Barbara's analysis that she put out on a report that was put forth by the British House of Lords in 2018, where they made very clear that under no circumstance could Donald Trump have a second term in office. And so I want to actually, let me go to our page here, because I think this is very important that people take a look at not only what we're putting forth to expose the enemy of our nation, of our republic, who is going after the livelihood of the population with the attacks on President Trump. But as I said, you can find the entire series to this five-part dossier. It is the British who murder our presidents. The British Empire is America's historic enemy. Here at the top of our page. And I encourage people, get this out on your social media pages. There was a response that was given by Steve Bannon, a number Trump Jr., Tucker Carlson. A number of people understand that this is a critical threat to a leading presidential candidate. What is happening right now in terms of the attempts and fight to take Donald Trump off the ballot is right along with this continued threat to the life of the president, but also to what is the intention by this globalist British agenda to destroy the United States. And this is what we have to put our foot down on to put a stop to once and for all to save our republic in 2024. I do want to point out to you that we have developed a series of additional reports that I encourage you to go to our website and take a look at. I believe that in addition to the 5-part series on exposing why the British Empire killed American presidents, you also should look at the report on 2024, what will it mean to make America great again? And also the latest economic report by Brian Lance, Boom Before Bust, quote, like to buy the Brooklyn Bridge, end quote. And there's a number of other and finally, if you did not take a look at it as I reported on at the beginning here, I want you to look at LaRouche PAC's year-end review. Some of you may have received that in an email if you're subscribed to our emails. If you'd like to subscribe to our emails, I would encourage you, if you're listening to this discussion, to go to our website and go to the Get Active page, and you will be able to get our emails and updates. So finally, I will just say, as I turn it over to Michael here to develop further, what we should be looking forward to in terms of the role of we the people, you the citizen, in this fight as we go into 2024. Today, one of what you will find, as I said, on the dossier, the 5-part dossier that was put out, is that one of the reports talks about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And today is the day that President Kennedy, in January 2nd of 2060, announced his campaign for the presidency. And that was a real turning point for the nation. And it was in November 22nd, 1963, that he was murdered. And as you will understand from these reports that are put out, the same thing that Kennedy was trying to do about bringing peace to the nation, stopping the wars, all of what he attempted to shut down the Federal Reserve, to put forth a national credit policy, you'll learn about in the reports. But this is the same thing that President Donald Trump was committed to doing, stopping the endless wars and stopping the agenda of the Federal Reserve and putting forth an American system type model of economic development, which we must commit to once again. So I wanted to start off with those details and now turn it over to Michael so we can continue on what this global showdown is about. It's not over yet, and we have to continue to escalate this fight and campaign. So 1 second here, and I'll turn it over to Michael. Okay, go ahead.
All right, thanks, Keisha. Hi, everyone. Welcome to 2024. Hope everyone had a good holiday season and a Merry Christmas. Look, what will define 2024 is going to be the quality of action that the American people can take. And it's a focus on action. But there are a lot of wrong actions in some sense, or insufficient actions. And so that's really the nature of this report that Keisha was kind of describing and promoting on our website. It will be made available as a pamphlet that you can print. If you are involved in any county parties, any grassroots groups, organize your neighbors, organize people at the coffee shop or at the car repair station or whatever. Print out these pamphlets and get them in the hands of people, because everyone is thinking, are they going to let Trump back into the White House? And as Keisha's referenced, and we've put on our website, we make note of it in this dossier. Even Robert Kagan, kind of the father of the neocon faction, the ghoulish husband of Victoria Nuland, came out in the Washington Post, a month and a half ago, with a long screed, basically comparing Trump to Caesar. And the whole question of Caesar is that if we all agree he should be assassinated, if we all stab him in some form, then we can get rid of him, but essentially calling for his assassination. And they tried January 6th. They tried all these other factors to try to destroy and end Trump's political career. Now they've got the legal fights, and I'm not going to go through it in detail because I think most of you already know, and if you don't, you can research it. We'll have more on our website. Trump is continuing to fight back against all of these legal attacks, including taking him off the ballot, which was really just more of a press campaign. They didn't take him off the ballot in places they're threatening to. They're promoting it, at least not in Colorado. I don't think in Maine either. But that's beside the point. The point is, to what degree can action be taken to ensure that the reason Trump is a threat, because they don't want to kill him for what he's done. They don't want to end his political career because of what he did. It's clearly what he may do. And what the enemy understands better than most Americans do is that what they recognize is that were Trump to win again, and of course, this time it'll be a magnitude difference than the last time, especially given what's happened in the last 3 years with November 3rd and all the other factors in between, and the exposure of what's happened in the wars and economic destruction and so on, that there will be a subjective shift in the minds of the American people, so that what people think is possible today, what the average American citizen is willing to do today, the sacrifices they're willing to make, the effort they're willing to make, even for this political fight, is drastically different than their efforts and sacrifices they're willing to make were Trump to win again. That all of a sudden new possibilities emerged that were impossible weeks, months prior. Because you're dealing with the human mind. You're not dealing with a mechanical or biological process. You're dealing with something that is governed by a sense of passion for truth, a sense of, to what degree is hope real and living, a real sense of what kind of future you can build, versus trying to survive and get by, which is what increasingly people have been forced to do. Many Americans are told their sacrifices aren't wanted. We saw this with COVID. We saw this in the military with the vaccines. Your sacrifices aren't worthwhile. You're not willing to play the political ball and go along and cohere. We don't really want your sacrifices. You're not even really worth dying. We don't even need you dying for the country. Let alone all the other factors that exist in the economy and the education and the culture in general today. The question, though, is how do we orient the American people to take sufficient action now? Those who are willing to make the sacrifices. Because I think all of us know, and I can speak from personal experiences, I'm sure all of you can, a lot of people that are complaining about a lot. They're complaining about the Republican Party. They're complaining about all different elements of the way our political process, our media, our society, our economy work. And yes, they're willing to support Trump increasingly. We've done studies here in Michigan And I think, or in California, where you're on the ground with various campaigns. And it's not surprising that when you look at what happens to voting potential and say what are traditionally Democrat areas, Black, Hispanic, inner city type areas, what happens when Trump is the candidate? Those areas turn more red, less blue and more red. That more people are willing to come out and vote for Trump in the poorer parts of the country than in the what you would consider more affluent or more stable, middle income type demographics, who may be traditional Republicans in some sense. But when you put Trump out there, they don't necessarily go more. There was a truth that Trump put out, which I thought captured this phenomena fairly well. And it was a number of words associated with Trump. I don't know if it was an internet study or a social media study or a polling done, but it was words associated with Trump. And so they had things, everything from hero to Hitler. But whatever the word was, if it was hero, it might be somewhat large in the middle. If it was Hitler, it'd be a little smaller and kind of faint. The prominence of the word on this chart showed the reasons why people, what they most associated with Trump. The number one word in the chart, the biggest, boldest, right smack in the middle, was revenge. Revenge for the wars, revenge for the globalization and destruction of our industry, revenge over the loss of jobs, the revenge over the culture, revenge over the bailouts to Wall Street and these creeps and the drug policies of Bush and Obama. That if there's a chance to stick it to this ruling class, and if anything, Trump, who says, I will be your retribution, it's that quality. But what makes him such a threat? What actions might he take, especially if the subjective response to the population is, we put somebody there to stick it to this class, to stick it to this system, this liberal, Malthusian, anti-human system, filled with massive bureaucracy of incompetent so-called experts and academics and ivory tower fools who should be washed out. We stuck it to them. What could Trump do that really throws the system over? Now, we've laid this out and many times, and the clear threat is what he might do to the central banking system, to industry, to the green agenda, to the open border, which is just sowing massive chaos in the country, the drug policy. These are the red lines for this enemy. But how do we provoke a sense in people's minds that changes the nature of the fight the way they think of it? That it's not a bunch of things that Trump would change. It's not simply a bunch of policies that are rotten, evil, satanic, destructive. The wars that are the situation in Ukraine is bizarre. Ukraine is now responding with outright terrorism towards civilians in Russia, with attacks in the southwestern Russia. Russia is retaliating, as well as attacks in Crimea, but Russia is retaliating with the largest airstrikes they've done in the entire war. Russia's productive capacity has only magnitudes increased, exponentially increased since the beginning of the war. You're talking about a real military power in Russia that didn't exist 3 or 4 years ago, just wasn't there, even 2 years ago. The situation in Israel is bizarre. Just as a quick note, the Red Sea is getting shut down. Iran is moving a destroyer into the Red Sea based on reports. Military helicopters of the United States took out 3 Houthi small ships that were trying to board a shipping vessel, container vessel. So the Red Sea is practically being shut down. Maersk, the largest shipping company in the world, is now going around Africa and the Cape of Good Hope. Just literal chaos, and what is potentially a breakout of a massive regional war, and the very location of where most of the world gets its energy supply, initiated in essence by a regime that is waging a war on fossil fuels and carbon-based fuels within our own country, within Europe, within the Nord Stream pipeline, and now in the Middle East. this regime is lunatic. What is this regime? Now, we've talked about it before. We can discuss the history of the British Empire, and we've done that well. And Bob Ingram has written quite a number of books, really, that gets at the essence of it. But we are talking about a kind of threat today that is very present, that Tucker Carlson or Steve Bannon or Peter Navarro or others, Kash Patel, others will quickly recognize that and Robert Kagan made it pretty clear. Laura Ingraham on Fox News said Robert Kagan's issuing an assassination threat. I mean, it was out there publicly, and it's not the only one, but it's one of the major ones in the Washington Post in November. Maybe Keisha can find the article Barbara Boyd wrote that covered it, but the second piece in the dossier also covers this. My point is that to rally the American people around an idea, a principle, that effective action is not going to simply be to get out and just mobilize, just be active. Of course, if you can, excellent. But oftentimes in warfare, coherence is key. Because coherence, especially strategic coherence, means that you are prepared to wage a war regardless of the losses you might incur. And that any substantial losses would mean even greater reasons to fight. I think people get what I'm saying, but let me just repeat it in a different way. I mean, you see this today in Russia. Russia is a more unified nation today because when this war started, maybe many Russians were confused. They supported the fact that they should defend their fellow Russians, ethnic Russians in Ukraine, who are under attack. But since the war started, it's become very clear that this is the United States and the NATO structure, the US regime, which is not us. It's always important to make that distinction. But this regime is waging a war via the Ukrainian people against Russia. That it's a strategic question. And increasingly, the spokespeople of Russia for their foreign ministry and so on have made it clear that the people responsible for this, increasingly they point to London. They also point to Washington, D.C. And their population is increasingly aware of the strategic fight. That same kind of process is what's critical. When Lincoln was asked, should we go after the British, he said, first we take care of the Confederacy, and then we take on the British. We can't fight two wars at once, because the British could have entered militarily. As you'll see in the third part of our dossier on Lincoln, without the British support of the Confederacy wouldn't have lasted more than a year. The same is true, and Bob Ingram makes the comparison, that our support for Ukraine is nearly equivalent to the British support of the Confederacy in terms of enabling a war. But strategic focus and conception are critical. And the strategic conception is not simply to shut down this green insanity, the open border chaos, the drug policy, which are really the three domestic and this cultural sexualization agenda, which are kind of the four horsemen of the apocalypse right now in the United States. It's not famine and so on as it was in the old days, but it's similarly satanic and destructive. Will lead to the old ones if you don't cut out the new ones. That this dossier makes a unique point that no one else is willing to make. Where is the threat really coming from? Where did the coup against Trump come from? Where do these policies of the green agenda and the sexualization of children and the culture generally and the open borders and the drug policies, where do these things come from? The financialization and globalization. They're not coming from the intrinsic culture of the United States. We can call them globalist, but it lacks specificity. Where are the globalists coming from? How are they acting specifically? We see this with the coup in Christopher Steele. It comes directly out of British intelligence. We see this with the Green Agenda, with King Charles leading the COP28 in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. So the fact that the British kill American presidents and that's where the threat's coming from today raises people's awareness that this is not politics as usual, that we are in a war, a political war with a real enemy, and that will be addressed by raising the level of strategic coherence within the American people, that we will rally the entire American demographic base who's been injured and destroyed by this economic insanity over the last 40, 50 years around rebuilding a real republic, a real question of self-government, of driving an economic program. That's why we've stressed Trump's Agenda 47, because he has a real broad vision, a vision that not only includes maybe building 10 new cities, but rebuilding the old ones as well, which he said recently in some of his speeches. So we're in the process of shaping a political culture in this country that, one, if they attempt to take Trump out physically, that they only create an even more powerful American citizenry that's focused on the real source of the enemy and problem. And increasingly, the more you have discussion of this, the more difficult it makes it to happen. And it also strengthens people. It pulls them out of their kind of suburban, nostalgic lifestyle that most people fall into, watching the football games over the holidays or whatever people do to try to distract themselves from the absolute insanity of our current society. But you've got to pull people and say, this is a war. Would you want your soldiers in the war distracted right now? Or would you want them prepared, not anxious, not chickens with their heads cut off, not trying to tear apart the state Republican Party like we have in Michigan right now? I mean, it's like total chaos here in Michigan. And really, you just want to try to stick with what you got for the moment, because Trump's campaign is going to make the difference. Trump launching a general campaign. We're less than 2 weeks from the Iowa caucuses. And so that really brings it to the main point. We've got a primary election. These next 30 days, these next 90 days are going to be critical for Trump to consolidate the nomination, to launch his general campaign, and to begin to target the truly forgotten men and women, which aren't the traditional Republican Nikki Haley's of the country, but are going to be the immigrant communities, the Black inner cities, the working class Hispanics, the forgotten white men who have been pushed aside and drugged and cast aside as unnecessary in society, the families with small children who want to see a potential future, that want to see a space program and scientific advancement. So this next period is critical, but it's critical that we don't just get people excited about the possibilities, because I think, as many of you know, and all of us probably do, people are concerned and worried, especially people that are very MAGA and Trump supporters. They don't see the Republican Party leading. They don't see a campaign structure. We're often told, whether it's in California, Texas, Washington, Michigan, wherever, you're the only ones doing something. You're the only ones really mobilizing, getting the word out, shaping policy, making discussions. Well, why? Well, because we have a sense that this is this kind of war, because there is a strategic coherence that LaRouche brought us over the last 40, 50 years. And it's time to bring this kind of strategic coherence to the tension we face today. Because, as we said in the email about tonight's discussion, this is a definitive election. Much like 1860 was, much like the American Revolution was, a decisive question. Thomas Paine's writings at the time Christmas, December of 1775, and so on. It was very much a question of people saying, well, if we wait longer, we'll be even larger in terms of the population size. And he said, well, the longer you wait, the less people have a sense of what was the actual culture prior to what was a new period of British tyranny, when there was a real self-governing quality to the colonies. And so the time is now. Well, certainly the time is now in this country. And this new dossier is going to be an ability to strike an awareness in the minds of people that this is the war we're fighting. And it is, in essence, a war that has been left unresolved. We talk about North and South Korea are still in a state of unresolved conflict, never a peace treaty. There's talk of attempting to impose, Russia probably won't accept it, of attempting to impose that same dynamic on Russia and Ukraine. We've been in a constant state of almost a stalemate. And over the last century, we've practically been brainwashed into thinking that we should just resolve it on the side of the British, that we were wrong and revolting in the first place. But now that we have, let's just use our power and strength on behalf of the empire. It's time to actually make a clear separation. And that's the subjective threat of Trump winning. It won't be an inevitability that Trump winning means we crush the British Empire and imperial systems once and for all. But it is by Trump winning that the subjective potential of the American people, in concert with nations like India and Russia and Mexico, as you'll see on our website, we have a very interesting post from our Mexican movement, collaborators in Mexico. But nations really around the world will rally to this cause if we continue to lead it. That the subjective potential in the minds and hearts of the Americans engaged in this kind of political fight means the potential to end this system of empire, this Malthusian looting system where you loot people, you tax them to death, you bureaucracy them to death, you put them in these slow grinding wars, you strip them of industry and production and energy, slowly but surely just wearing them down. That's the imperial system today. We can crush it, and they know we would have the power to crush it if we win this election. And that really is the threat. And that's why this dossier becomes so important. It's really now time to wage a coup on them. They attempted a coup on Trump and us beginning 2015, 2016. It's now time to wage a coup on them. And to strengthen the American people, to sober them up, to get them to stop complaining, to stop trying to tear down what they think are insufficient institutions, and to start building new institutions based on this kind of coherent strategic action. It's how wars are won. It's how real armies are built. It's how you create leadership. And it's what our focus is tonight.